Hey, what's up guys, my name is Chris, and it's official now that the Huawei P series will be launching in 3 variants every year. We saw it last year with the P10 series, and now we've also seen it this year again with the P20 series. That's the P20 Pro, the P20, and now this one, the P20 Lite, a beautiful piece of tech. It's meant to be the lighter version, the under-spec budget version of the 3 variants. The P20 Lite is not a flagship by any means. It wasn't meant to be anyway. That's why P20 Pro is there. But this thing really has an appeal to it, especially because of the way it looks. I don't know if it's just me, but this thing looks really gorgeous. The way it shines and looks premium, and that color is really unique. Especially this color, they're calling it the Klein Blue. They have 2 other colors, the Midnight Black and Sakura Pink, whatever that means. But this is definitely the better looking one of the 3. So as you can already tell, I'm a big fan of the aesthetics outside, and this is something Huawei have been doing well for a while. They always come up with these new designs and new colors that other companies are not bold enough to try, and they always seem to nail it year after year. If you've seen the Twilight Huawei P20 Pro, then you might have an idea of what I'm talking about. But this phone looks and feels very premium, despite the fact that it has a plastic back. I'm not sure how they were able to make it so glossy and shiny that it almost looks like glass, but it's plastic, trust me. And with all this glossiness, of course you expect a ton of fingerprints and reflections of this back. At the front, the main attraction is obviously that display that stretches to the top corners, sandwiching that notch in the middle. It's a 5.8-inch 1080 by 2280p IPS display with an unconventional 19 by 9 aspect ratio. The display gets bright enough to be used indoors, but you'll encounter a few problems, especially legibility problems when you're out in the sun. And it's in areas like this where the quality really starts to show, especially when you compare this phone with its bigger brother or other phones in this price category with AMOLED displays that get really bright and you can use them even outdoors with no problem at all. But I like what Huawei has been doing with the notches, just keeping them as small as possible just to house the front-facing camera, the earpiece, and a few sensors. And like what you saw in the iPhone 10 when this notch madness began. But it still doesn't change my mind about the notch or anything. I still hate the notch, but I think this is one of the better looking ones. You can turn it off in the settings if you don't want to see it, but because it's an IPS display, the pixels don't disappear as well as they disappear in AMOLED displays. There's a chin at the bottom that does nothing except carry the name Huawei, and then you have the vertically stacked dual camera system in the Lite version this time, and the LED flash just below them. So generally it's a nicely built phone, a definite head turner with that new design and the new color. The 3.5mm headphone jack is here as well, together with USB Type-C this time, and it supports fast charging, which is nice. There's also a single downward facing speaker, which doesn't sound great or get loud enough for me for some reason. Every time I push the volume up to 80%, it starts getting squeaky and distorted. I have to stop. And it also doesn't have a secondary speaker in the earpiece for that stereo sound. So the speaker game is kind of weak in this one. This phone is also not water and dust resistant. I'm not sure if it's because of the combination between the plastic back and this aluminum frame. I don't know. But when you look closely, you can actually see some space between the aluminum frame and the plastic back. These buttons on the side also feel kind of cheap and not as clicky or tactile as I'd like them to be, or as they are on other smartphones in this price range. This phone is powered by the Kirin 659 processor. It has 4 gigs of RAM and 32 or 64 gigs of internal storage, of course with the option of expandable storage, and a 3000 mAh battery. So these are obviously specs you'd expect from a mid-range smartphone, but I feel like Huawei could have done themselves justice with a better processor, maybe a Qualcomm. The Kirin 659 is kind of an outdated processor, and you can tell when you're using the phone for a while that there's a bit of lag. It's a little, but it's noticeable, especially when you're using these resource-intensive applications like 3D games and stuff like that. You'll notice some kind of lag and frame loss when using the app for a while. So the camera on this thing, like I mentioned earlier, is a dual camera setup. The primary being a 12 megapixel sensor with f2.2 aperture lens, and the secondary camera is a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. It does take some of the best photos for smartphones in this price category, especially if you can hold your phone very still, because it lacks both optical and electronic image stabilization, which I'm sure is a deal breaker for a lot of people. But if you can do without image stabilization, the photos taken on this phone are sharp and vibrant, and dynamic range isn't too bad as well. Color accuracy also isn't too bad. I mean, the camera is okay, I'm not getting blown away here or anything, but it's a good camera, it's okay for this price range. A decent amount of bokeh also can be achieved with the subject close to the camera sensor, which makes for those nice blurred background images that are always awesome to look at. But the video game on this phone is weak. It only shoots in 1080p, and of course with lack of any kind of stabilization on these phones, getting smooth footage is a tall order. The front facing camera is a 16 megapixel sensor, good enough to take nice portrait selfies. It has that portrait mode built in, although it's not as good with edge detection, but it's still good enough for a mid-range smartphone. It also has beauty mode, if you're into that, but the artificial intelligence that Huawei normally incorporates into their camera app isn't there in this P20 Lite. I don't mind the omission. Personally, I'm not a fan of enhanced photos. I like just taking photos of what I'm looking at. I don't like taking photos and then they get automatically enhanced. I don't like that. So the plain camera app on this phone is good enough for me. The battery on this phone, like I mentioned, is a 3000 mAh battery, not the biggest battery you'll see in a Huawei phone, not the biggest battery you'll see on other phones in this price category, but surprisingly the battery life is really impressive for this phone. I'm getting up to 6 or 7 hours of screen on time with moderate usage, and there are a couple of reasons why this seemingly small battery seems to last longer than even bigger batteries. And number one is that display. This is only a 1080p IPS display, which means it's not using a lot of energy. The GPU is not working as hard as it would on other phones like the P20 Pro, so it's saving on battery. Also on this skin, the Huawei skin, they use EMUI 8.0 on top of Android 8.0, has a lot of AI features that tend to learn the habits, and it knows when to switch this display to Quad HD, and it knows when to reduce the brightness, it knows when to make the apps sleep, and it knows how to do a lot of things to save your battery. So this Huawei skin on top of Android is definitely helping with your battery conservation and prolonging your battery life. It also has a lot of other features that you might never use. That's EMUI for you. But all in all, this is definitely one of the mid-range smartphones of 2018 with an awesome camera, an awesome design, good battery life, and the small emissions or flaws it may have don't matter too much to me not to recommend this phone at $300. It's definitely a thumbs up for me, this one. But thanks for watching. Until the next one, my name is Chris, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.